Hi buddies! Welcome back to Emergency Pineapple Studios, where I talk about things that I love and hopefully you do too, and today we're going to be talking about D&D again. Today's going to be another quick build video where I talk about some races and I come up with 3 builds for them. A basic build, an intermediate build, and a complex build. For today, we're going to go over one of my favorite races, that being the Dwarves. Before we get started, I want to reference the fact that I am going to be focusing on the 2024 Player's Handbook, but I will make references back to the 2014 version of the book. So, with that out of the way, let's get crafting. Dwarves find their origins coming from Celtic and Nordic mythologies, and as such, their fantasy cultures tend to reflect both of these. They have a little bit of Vikings, but also a little bit of Irish and Scottish in them. So, that's why in a lot of universes, they tend to have Irish or Scottish accents, if not sometimes Swedish. In addition to that, most dwarves tend to be created by some sort of forge god taking some of the mountain or hills, or basically some form of earth, molding the dwarves, and then the dwarves get turned from stone to flesh. This is like a common story amongst all the dwarven cultures. As such, they actually tend to have a few affinities because of this. Their first affinity is with stoneware, including stones, metal, jewels, and anything that comes from the earth itself. But this also leads to their second affinity, which is craftsmanship. Now, dwarves don't just make weapons and armor. No. They like making all kinds of crafts, including houses, roads, statues, and even alcohol and meat. Yes, dwarves really love their alcohol and meat. So, I guess they're the medieval or mythological version of the common suburban redneck dad. This leads to their third affinity, which is a tribal affinity. Dwarves are very much a clan-based society. Whoever is in our clan, this is our family, and the more of us there are, the stronger we are. Their blood goes thick for their family and their clans. They will go to war if you just wronged one member of their clan. These guys are the most brotherhood, fraternity, and sorority kind of people that I would love to be around. This also means that they very much love their traditions and they can do whatever they can to keep them alive. This leads finally to their fourth affinity, and that is battle. Dwarves love a good brawl. Whether it's a tavern brawl or a war, a dwarf is willing to go and solve their problems with their fists before their words. Now, it doesn't mean that they don't use their words, but if they have a problem with you, they'd rather duke it out first, and then, after all the aggression's out, then they'll talk. With all that established, let's get to the builds. This build is almost about as basic as you're gonna get, and that is a dwarf barbarian. Now hear me out. Dwarves are not only known for their strength and their constitution, but they're also known for having a natural sense of battle, as I have established earlier. Barbarians are a natural choice because of their natural inclination to fight. They're easy to play, they have a lot of resistances, and they have the battle rage to go along with it. On top of that, barbarians are actually mostly based on Viking culture, especially the Berserker class. And because of that, it fits in so well with the already established Nordic ancestry of the dwarves. For selecting your background, I would go with farmer for a couple of reasons. The first of these reasons is that it comes with the tough feat as its origin feat. Which you can then stack onto the racial feat of the dwarven toughness, but also stack on with the resistances that come with the battle rage, along with unarmed defense and unarmed movement. So, to be honest, you're gonna have just extra health just from being a dwarf. On top of that, you will get extra health from being a farmer, but then you'll have more ways of taking as little damage as possible by simply raging and having that D12 hit dice. On top of that, the farmer becomes proficient with strength and constitution saving throws, but they also become proficient with carpenter's tools, probably because of all the things they have to build on the farm. But this plays well with the dwarven culture because carpenter's tools are a form of craftsmanship, and as such, the dwarf will know how to make things. At the very least, he'll know how to make things like a ladder, a plow, or hell, they can probably even, carve wooden statues. Plus, as a farmer, the barbarian can be proficient in creating and knowing how to handle their meaty dishes and, sometimes, their alcohol. It's not only super easy to play, but it fits right in with the dwarven culture. However, I will say now that if you're playing the 5th edition version, instead of having the farmer background, I would highly recommend the folk hero background instead. It fits just as well. You'll be playing something similar to Paul Bunyan or John Henry. For the Dwarven Intermediate build, I had a lot of options that I considered, but I decided to settle on Fighter for this video. Fighters are in a weird spot when it comes to difficulty, but it's not because of the fighter class itself, it's actually based on their subclasses. Some of the fighter subclasses are super simple to use, like Champion, where others are more complex, like the Battle Master with all of its superiority dice and all that fun things. However, the fighter still fits in with the dwarven culture and need for battle. As such, a dwarf fighter is not only something that you would probably run into, but it's something you can actually work with, conceptually. The background I've selected might be a little cliche, but it fits perfectly with the dwarven culture, that being the artisan background. And there's a couple reasons why I think it works really well. Mechanically, you get 4 proficiencies in craftsman's tools. 3 actually come from the crafter feat that you get as an origin feat. The 4th one comes from the artisan background itself. As such, you now have a dwarf fighter who is capable of being the group's repairman. So on top of throwing hands and slicing up monsters, you're also good at repairing all the group's armor, weapons, or even just, making them gear or a home to live in. Plus, being an artisan goes with the attitude of being a dwarf, and that is crafting, working hard, and, enjoying what you do. So as such, I think it would make for a great intermediate build because it still leans towards being simple like the barbarian, but it also can be super complex depending how you build it, which is why I've decided that it is the perfect intermediate build to play as for a dwarf. And now we get to the complex build that I've decided on for the dwarves, and what I have decided for is the Bard. Now, most of the time when people play a dwarf, they tend to play a martial character over a spellcaster character. So already, I was going to be picking a spellcaster for this complex build. However, the reason I decided on Bard is that where it doesn't seem like it would fit well with dwarven culture, it actually fits better than people give it credit for. Now, let me explain why. The first thing I want people to know is I am aware of the certain stereotypes that bards get. They're usually either very spoony, they're very lighthearted, they don't take anything seriously, and they're mostly known for causing chaos. Dwarves, on the other hand, are very stout. They're very, at the grindstone. They're hard-working, and they're very much, very quiet and almost pseudo-lawful most of the time. However, I do actually think the Bard can work if you go away from certain stereotypes for both of them. The first thing I want to take away is what instruments the Bard is most commonly known to play. Most of the time when people play Bards, they tend to give them things like lutes, harps, or guitars. Instead, for this dwarf, imagine drums or bagpipes. Now we have a dwarf who's still getting into very much what is considered the dwarven culture, especially if you consider the origins of dwarves in reality based on Scotland, Ireland, Sweden, and all the other Nordic states, because now they're going to be playing very much things that are pseudo, battle chants, or just, playful songs that go with them. And for those of you who think that dwarves can't sing, I would like to remind you that we have things like Diggy Diggy Hole and Misty Mountains. And if you have not heard either of those songs, go look them up. I'll wait for you. I'll give you 2 seconds. 1, 2, go. This brings me to what background I think the dwarf should be, and I'm gonna say that the background I think you should select is the scribe background. Scribes' jobs are to record and write down works of great literature, works of poetry, stories, history. Their entire job is in writing things down and recording things. Now, combine that with a musician. What do you get? You would get a conductor and someone who likes to write things like operas, concertos, beautiful, powerful music that inspires. But most importantly, as a scribe, the music becomes a craft. And that's the important takeaway that I want this bard to be. We have now taken the concept of crafting, and instead of applying it to a physical thing, we have now applied it to music. And I think that's why the bard fits very well in with the dwarven culture, if not the normal way, but a more unique way. Plus, taking on the scribe gives you the skilled feat, which makes you proficient in 3 different other skills that you can then use to build on. But it also combines fairly well with the bard ability of Jack of all trades. Whatever this dwarf happens to be good at, they are excellent at. Whatever they're not great at, they at least know how to do. With that being said, now you have a dwarf who is not going to be considered normal by dwarven standards, but somehow still fits in very well. Especially if you decide to go play like the Scottish way and you have a warpiper. If you make a warpiper, you are now my friend. I want to come meet you. And this wraps up the Dwarven Quick Build. If you like what you saw, or you have any other comments of characters that you want to develop, or things you want me to talk about, leave them in the comments below. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I hope to see you guys again. See you next time. Have fun delving in dungeons.